Alright guys, welcome back to another tutorial. Now this week, much anticipated video. I've been getting a lot of requests on how I like to do my fades, what the process is of when I do a skin fade. So today, it's gonna be less about shear work and more about fading. And Justin is someone that I cut inside the shop. I've been cutting him for a long time now, and he likes to rock a high skin fade. Now, when we talk about high skin fade, right? I think before running down head shape, where the weight line is gonna sit, I'm gonna talk about one thing. So this haircut's gonna be a buzz cut with the skin fade. Now, obviously the buzz cut's not gonna be super short because he likes to rock some texture up top. But knowing that it's a buzz cut, right? The only thing that's gonna matter in this case scenario is the roundness of the corners. Without much to say, let's get right into this haircut. This one's gonna be the buzz cut with a clean skin fade. Hope you guys enjoy. Obviously, I'm gonna be buzzing the top into a 6 or 7 guard, right? So all of this is gonna get lighter. Now, you might be wondering, where's the weight line gonna sit for the fade? All I need to do is do the same thing, use my comb method. I'm gonna place my comb on top, and I'm gonna bend it all the way through. Now, once I bend it all the way through, I'm gonna align it, right, with the side of his head. Now, once I do this, I'm able to gauge where his jaw likes to sit. So all I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go from his jawline, and I'm gonna go straight up, and you're gonna naturally be able to see a corner built up in this area right here. So this is ideally where you wanna flush the weight out for it to look good with his face shape from the front. So whenever I like to debulk the haircut, I always like to start with the weight line matching the jawline. All I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and debulk all this, and the fade guideline, where I debulk into the fade, I'm gonna match it into the weight line of his jaw. So there's no head shape to read today because I'm gonna be buzzing everything. But one thing to keep in mind is where his jaw naturally likes to sit. That way, we can just build that weight line to his facial structure. So for my clippers today, I'm gonna be using my Rebels by Stylecraft. And this is the only clipper that I'm gonna be using. So highly recommend this tool. For my trimmers, I like to keep 2 trimmers. One's gonna be the JRL, and the other one's gonna be these Cocos. Now, why do I like to have 2 trimmers when I do a skin fade? Number one, one's gonna be for debulking, and one's gonna be for lineups. The one with the lineup is 0 gapped, so it gets closer to skin. The one that has debulking method, the one I use to debulk, is gonna be a stronger motor, allowing me to remove the hair better. So the stronger tool, I don't 0 gap, and the tool that I like to do lineups with, I'm gonna 0 gap because this is gonna be a little bit more sensitive, a little bit more of a detailed tool, you could say, and then this one's gonna be more for the motor and the power. And then last but not least, for my shaver, I'm gonna go with my FX3 from Babyliss. For my first step of this haircut, I'm gonna go ahead and start with my 7. Number 7 is gonna go on top, and I'm just gonna go ahead and hit the whole head on top. Notice how it's lightened everything up. Now, with the buzz cut, for the best symmetry, I always go against the grain first. First step is to go against the grain, then I go diagonal, and then I hit the crown and the parietal ridge in every direction as well. So first step is gonna be against the grain, diagonal, other side, and last but not least, finish with the crown. Okay, so the crown, making sure everything is even. Now, I think one thing that people need to understand when doing buzz cuts is that the density in the hairline is not the same for everyone, right? For instance, Justin's hair, what I know is that the corners are slightly lighter than the middle. Now, it's our job as barbers and artists to make sure that the hairline feels as even as possible for our clients. Now, how are you gonna do that, right? The biggest trick to getting that done is you're gonna lower the hairline and see how everything's sitting. Now, I'm gonna grab a lower guard, which is gonna be my 6, and now the corners are gonna stay at a 7, but the middle, I'm gonna hit with the 6. Okay, just the middle. And as I go towards my corners, okay, I'm just flicking out. And what that's gonna do, that slight difference, is gonna make Justin's hairline feel a lot more full when he's styling it. All right, so first step is gonna be to use this corner of the hairline as my guideline and the debulk. Once I reach this area with my clipper guard, I'm gonna know when to stop. I'm gonna be using a 2 guard open, and I'm just gonna be debulking into that line. I'm gonna follow that throughout the whole head. Okay, using my corner of the hairline as my guide for where the weight line is going to sit. And my 2 guard is left open. The reason why I like to always debulk with my guard open is it leaves a soft finish so that I don't really have to do much at the end. I'm gonna use a clipper blade closed over using a trimmer so that it could have a softer guideline throughout the fringe. Do the same thing on this other side. And if you guys notice, when I'm flicking slightly out because I want this guideline to get easily removed. Once I set in my guideline, there's 2 things I'm gonna check for. First is gonna be the weight line of the haircut, right? Is this weight line symmetrical with the jawline? That's my first step that I check. Second thing that I take a quick look of is, are these 2 guidelines sitting in the exact same areas? Guys, if you do this every single time, you're gonna end up with a perfect, even skin fade every single time. The most reasons why people mess up on skin fades is because the guideline is sitting uneven or the weight line is sitting uneven. As long as your client notices that the weight line and the guideline is very, very symmetrical, how many times does a client actually complain about, oh, the fade's not blurry enough, right? We don't really get that too often, but the biggest complaints that I hear inside the shop is, oh, the fade's not even, or the weight line isn't even. So as long as you're able to lock in these 2 things every single time, you're gonna get consistency behind the chair and your clientele of skin fades are gonna start flowing in. For the final step, you're gonna grab your half guard, you're gonna go slightly open, and you're gonna flick out into this weight line. Once you're halfway, you're gonna flick out all the way with it all the way open. And once you're at that point, you're gonna go ahead and close it up all the way, and you're gonna flick that last line out. And once you do that, you're set up with the perfect foundation for you to go ahead and line up and detail the rest of your fade, and pretty much the fade is complete. So I'm gonna do the same thing for the other side here, guys. All I'm gonna do, go halfway open with my half guard and go right down in between the debulk line and the guideline. And the important part is that here I'm flicking out. I'm not flicking in, I'm flicking out. Okay, once you flick halfway through, I'm gonna go ahead and open that up fully and flick out the rest of that line. Okay, close that up. Okay, if needed, I'm gonna go in with my 1.5 now, just to remove that small shadow. And that's pretty much complete, okay? Very quick fading process that I want you guys to understand that once you're spending too much time on a fade, it doesn't mean that the fade's gonna turn out right. It's knowing which guard to use and how to use it and how to really use the angle of the blade to create that perfect gradient. We're gonna be finishing off the back. Guard halfway open, same thing. Flick out this line halfway. Once you reach the halfway point, okay, you're gonna open it up all the way. Okay, close it up. And you guys probably noticed in this back area, you're gonna have to corner and go in with your 1.5, 1 guard a little bit more than the sides because the dip is a lot more drastic. Okay, and once you hit it with that 1.5, it's just perfectly blending in. My idea behind the skin fade is once you set the weight line in, you flick everything out because that weight line you don't want to ruin. And now what I'm doing is that I'm just lever playing and I'm detailing the fade, right? So for this bottom lock guideline, for instance here, I want to show you guys something. Okay, if this is a rough draft of my fade, I gotta understand the difference of each layer. So from here to here, right, it's gonna go from a 2, which is a 1.5 open, into a half guard open, which is technically 0.75 or 1. So what is this line gonna blend out with? Most likely a 1 guard halfway, because 1.5 and 0.75, in between those two numbers is gonna be 1.25. So we're gonna grab 1.25 and we're just gonna flick out. All the way open, 1.5. Okay, and notice how that line is disappeared. Now what about this shadow right here? It goes from a 0, but because the clipper blade is closed, it's not a full 0. It's probably gonna be a 0.125, 0.2. And this middle line right here is gonna be 0.75 because it's a half guard, halfway open. What you gotta understand here is that it's probably going to be your clipper blade with no guard, halfway. Because that's what's gonna be in between a halfway through, half guard, and a no guard close, right? So you just gotta understand what you're fading and just remember your base rules. That's why I only like to set maximum 2 guidelines so that I'm not really getting so mixed up in this process here. And when I'm detailing, notice I only use my corners because the flat of the blade is gonna remove more hair. Okay, a little bit above that, open it up. Okay, just my corners. Okay, and we're coming out with a very, very, very solid foundation now. I'm just detailing my fade. Same thing here, using my half guard to detail in between each line. And you guys are gonna be slowly starting to see this gradient come together. Okay, and before I finalize my fade, I always like to go ahead and finish everything else first. For instance, the beard, the lineup, because I wanna do the last finishing touches on finalizing and polishing this fade when everything is put together, right? I look at the polished fade as a cherry on top rather than I'm trying to get this perfect, because a lineup, you can only do it once. Cleaning up the beard, you can only do it once. Skinning out the bottom, you can only do it once. But finalizing and polishing the fade, you can do that over and over again. So once I set in the rough draft, I do a rough touch up, and then I go ahead and finish everything else up first. And then I go into my polishing step, which is my final step for this haircut. We're gonna go ahead and skin them out using my JRL. We're gonna go right underneath that and remove all the hairs. For the skin line here, I'm just gonna go ahead and flick up every single time. So as I hit up to this line, I'm just gonna go ahead and flick up. The reason why I flick so much during my process is because I wanna save time and I wanna reduce mistakes. So the more I set in guidelines, it's just making more opportunities where I can make mistakes all over the place. And for the beard, because I know this area is probably like a 2 guard, I'm just fading down from there. Just lightly blending this in. And you guys might be wondering that you guys want to see every little step with this beard area that I'm doing here. There's gonna be a beard tutorial on the way, so you guys can just look out for that. With Justin's beard, I'm not gonna do a beard tutorial because I want to do a beard tutorial on a haircut that has a full beard. With Justin's beard, I kinda just do more of a touch up because he does like to keep his beard a little bit more heavy. Okay, lightly blending it in. Okay, just down fading as I go down, eyeballing the length, and once I get to a point that I like it at, okay, I'm just able to stop. For a stash, I'm just gonna go in with my 1 guard, halfway open. I'm gonna lighten that up. I want to show you guys a little technique that I use when, working with shorter lengths like this. obviously the hairline, right? It's gonna be hard to have the perfect symmetry with the weight sitting in the hairline using a clipper guard, right? So what I'm gonna do is actually, I'm gonna touch up the weight line using a feather razor. Because naturally, when you hit it with the 7th guard, what's gonna end up happening is this apex is gonna be left a lot heavier. Now the issue with that is because this is a shorter haircut, I still want it to sit somewhat square. So I'm gonna reduce some of this weight in this apex. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna visually go in, grab a feather razor, and I'm just gonna lighten up some of the weight that's sitting in the apex before I go in with my lineup. And what that's gonna do for me is, it's gonna allow the corners to stay heavier, but the apex is just gonna get a lot lighter. And you gotta be careful because you don't wanna set in any holes with this haircut, but you do wanna lighten up the density so that everything visually looks even. Visually lightening everything up, and especially in the hairline, you guys can now see the density is perfectly the same. Now I'm gonna go in with my lineup, starting from the middle. Okay, making sure my hairline is square. So I start from the middle and I draw a straight line out. Same thing with this other side, using my middle as the guideline. Being a little bit more cautious towards the corners because his corners are a little bit lighter. And because I want to lighten up the density in just the fringe just a tad bit more, I'm gonna grab my 3 guard, open it up, and I'm just gonna hit up. Okay, not hitting my corners, just the fringe. And that's gonna allow the fringe to sit just a tad bit shorter, okay? And any disconnections that you notice, you can just feather it in. All right, so we're just gonna get into our final detailing process. And this is where you're gonna be able to see me really polish up this haircut and make it go from a great haircut to an amazing haircut right here. These are the little things I notice, especially when I do a fade. I take a step back and I take a look at the shadows that I notice. So I'm gonna take a step back, and you guys are probably gonna be able to see the same shadows as me. But right here, I notice a very, very slight shadow. Now, how am I gonna take this shadow out? That's gonna be through lever play, and that's gonna be through using the right guard. So I'm gonna go with the 1 guard and go in with my corners just to remove these shadows. Okay, 1 guard halfway. If the halfway doesn't cut anything, I go closed. Okay, halfway. And once I remove that shadow, I take a step back. Now what do I notice? I notice something even different now. Because this area is much more blurry, I notice a different flaw about this haircut, which is this top portion right here. I notice that there's a very, very heavy shadow going to the parietal ridge. Now, how am I gonna remove this shadow right here? It's gonna be through my 1.5 guard. Okay, so the 1.5 guard goes on, and I'm gonna start with halfway. If it doesn't cut anything that I wanna remove, close it up. Same thing with the front, 1 guard halfway. Close it up. And I'm just using my corners to really play with this haircut. And you can see this fade really coming together now. Okay, even these little areas right here, I use the same exact method. Because I know this area was a 1.5, this area was a half, I just lever play depending on where I'm at with the fade. This area was obviously skin. And I use the same method. If it's not cutting anything, I just lower the lever a little bit. If it's cutting too much, I just higher the lever a little bit. And I'm only using my corners, that way there's not gonna be any gaps within the fade. Once you start using too much of the flat of your blade, that's when you're gonna notice that your fade is just gonna be very, very gappy everywhere, and you're not gonna have this super, super blurry fade effect. I'm just finalizing the detail of fade. Honestly, this is already a perfect fade in itself, but there's little details that I notice. For instance, this bottom line is not as consistent as I want. So I just go in and I'm using my corners just to touch these areas up. Corners only, guys, when you're detailing. Okay, for when I set in my rough foundation, that's when I'm able to kind of just more wing it. This is the area that I need to stay a little bit more focused and really lock into what I'm doing, because this is what's gonna make a $50 fade go to a $100 fade. Getting close to the end of this haircut. Alright guys, so for the final step here, we're gonna be going ahead and doing Justin's lineup. We're gonna start with the right side, move on to the middle, and then finish off with our left side. Head's gonna be tilted. I'm gonna peel the skin, right? Stretch the skin out. Now we're kind of moving against the grain to make sure he doesn't have any baby hairs left. The left side, and it's important when you're blading that we're peeling and stretching the skin back. And because I want the final product of this haircut to have some texture, I'm gonna go ahead and use a product that's gonna enhance some texture. So in this case, matte pomade would be perfect. So I'm gonna throw some texture paste by Mason's Pomade into the haircut and really enhance that texture, because this buzz cut, although it's a buzz cut, right? This 7 or 8 guard is gonna allow me to have a bit of texture. So because it's short, I'm gonna move in circular motions and just really bring that texture to life. And if it's not holding, okay, I could just go ahead and add a little bit more and just use it to your preference. Alright guys, so here it is, the final product of the textured buzz cut with the high skin fade. Highly requested haircut. I love doing this haircut inside the shop. I feel like it's such a sleek, clean, timeless look that fits, you know, anyone that wants a fresh look for the summer. So with that being said, hope you guys enjoyed today's tutorial. I'm gonna be showing you guys the final look. And yeah, just make sure to follow along those steps and try it out behind the chair. But let's get into the final product, guys.